would be great for Friday the 13th, I think Friday the 13th, I think the trouble with making it a show akin to something like Scream is that, you know, Scream's a franchise where every movie has a different killer. It's the same costume, but it's a different person. You know, Halloween's a franchise where it's always the same person. You know, Michael Myers is always the killer.
Right.
So to do a show where the killer isn't Michael Myers would be pretty tough. So you kind of, I don't know how they would do that in a way that would be overly satisfying, but at the same time, like, I would probably watch it. You know, if a Halloween show came out, I can't see a world where I wouldn't at least check it out.
Yeah,
and I think that's the thing about horror fans is we're all gonna keep tuning into these things if they have that name.
Well, and horror fans are pretty forgiving, and you slap Halloween moniker on it, they'll be willing to give it a chance. You know, even if the writers take it into a different direction or try something new. I think we're probably the most forgiving.
Oh yeah, seriously, I'm on a couple podcasts, and we always joke that like I kind of like everything for the most part. Like I'm generally very forgiving of most things, and part of it is when I watch something, I purposefully look for things I like. You know, there are always going to be things I don't like, but I look for the things I really love, and then I tend to like call those things out and focus on those things. And then I end up walking away much happier. So,
well, and that's good too. And that's the makings of an excellent reviewer, because I think we're living in a world where I think we should uplift people. And I was just so blown away by Host, which came out during the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, and again, just simple structure, and they did some great things in it. I think we should more so be supportive of one another. You know, granted, there's probably not that great material out there, but I, like you, try to find the positive in stuff I've seen or even review, because I too contribute to a site.
Totally understand that. It's more fun to watch movies that way. And I think when you're a horror fan, the cool thing about being a horror fan is you typically like, you know, you look at the effects separately, then you look at the performances, and you look at that separately, then you look at the camera work, right? And the direction. Like, we tend to be, not to sound like hoity-toity about it, but we tend to be discerning viewers in some ways, even when we're not thinking that we are, you know, but we're appreciative of all the small things in a horror film, because a lot of those movies don't have a lot of money behind them. They don't have the A-list actors. They have to work harder to be good. So when there's something in there that you can appreciate amidst other things that maybe aren't working that well, you know, that stands out. And you're like, oh, that's really cool. You know, when someone watches Evil Dead for the first time, there's a lot of things you could focus on that aren't great, right? You could focus on the caliber of the actors. Like, they're very clearly amateur actors, right? They didn't have a lot of money. It's, you know, it doesn't look pristine and shiny, but then you see Sam Raimi's camera work.
Yeah.
And it's just a different language, right? It's a foreign language of a movie for the average viewer the first time you see it. And you're like, man, I want to learn to speak this language. This is exquisite. You know, that whatever is happening here, I am in love. Yeah. And yeah, it's just great.
It's like building a relationship. And I'll be honest, like you said, I had to warm up to Evil Dead because I knew it had such a cult following, and horror fans loved it. And at the first time I saw it, I was like, really? And I think what's amazing about horror filmmakers is they're just willing to take more risks, you know, like Raimi did with Evil Dead. And they just got a bunch of friends together and created something amazing. And I mentioned Host earlier, and that's essentially what Host was. And I think the risk is low. I think when you're getting a bunch of friends together and creating something out of nothing with very little money, I mean, if it fails, it fails, you know, and you try again with something else. And I think, whereas if it's sci-fi, you know, you probably need a bigger budget, you know, it's just, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, horror lends itself to the amateur production in some ways. And like you said, the fans are more forgiving. And there's a suspension of disbelief that comes along with the sort of extreme situations horror deals in that is harder to manifest in a drama, for example, where things are more grounded. in a grounded reality, you're going to be more, oh, that doesn't look real. And that person's not a good actor. So how can I buy into this? Versus like demons are rising from the ground and, coming from this book, it's like, okay, well, I can accept that things are crazy because that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, in a drama, you're looking for a name actor or somebody that can handle the material and you want to believe in it. But with horror, oftentimes the characters are just getting dispatched, right? Right and left. But more and more people, but with Jordan Peele, entering the
right.
fray.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, we say that, but at the same time, there are movies that have those performances. Yeah, I mean, us and Get Out, of course, and then we also have like Ari Aster making like Midsummer and Hereditary, and we have Robert Eggers with The Witch, and The Lighthouse. The Lighthouse isn't really horror per se, but it kind of falls into that category in some ways. So I mean, I think there are movies today and over time that have had those performances in them. But the genre, I mean, that's why the horror genre is so fun, is it's a very wide reaching thing that covers the full spectrum of genre.
We talked about it a little bit. So what is your relationship or feeling about the new Scream, which I guess is going to hit theaters in January?
Yeah. So Scream, so man, that Scream goes back. That was one of the very first, it wasn't the first like horror movie I ever saw or was exposed to, but it was one of the first ones I really sat down, watched, and enjoyed. I've mentioned this before on podcasts and stuff, but like I was kind of a latecomer to horror. I was not the kid who grew up obsessively watching horror movies. In fact, I was really against that. I was like, oh, they're too scary. I don't like blood. I don't want to see any of it. And then one day at a sleepover in the summer of like what was probably 98, my friend sat me down and made me watch a VHS tape of Scream. And I was like so against it. It was this big battle, but I was there. They were putting it on. I didn't have a choice. And we watched it. And I was like delighted by this movie. I was like, oh, this is scary, but it's fun. Like, it's funny. It's a whodunit. Like, and there's elements to it that I was just really surprised by. And I love that there were two killers, and the Billy and Stu relationship I found really fascinating. That like very early on, I was like, something's up with this. This is not your average, sort of character dynamic, especially in this kind of movie, which I didn't even have the wherewithal to know too much about slashers. But it started me down a path that led to pretty quickly thereafter, Halloween H2O was in theaters, and we convinced a parent to take us. And the only reason I went was because I saw Scream, and they marketed H2O like sort of a Scream type movie. So my first exposure to the Halloween movies was Halloween H2O in a theater. And so, from there, I kind of went back to the beginning. Like in college, a teacher showed me Halloween 1. I was like, oh my God, he showed the opening scene to Halloween 1 on Halloween in a film class.
Nice.
And that was my first exposure to it. And the long one single take shot, or I guess it was like 2 or 3 takes spliced together. But like, I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, this is like filmmaking, in a slasher movie. Like, what? It's because I was kind of that pretentious college student.
Right.
And I immediately went to the video store and rented Halloween, and was just utterly blown away by the artistry of it. And then, from there, my brother and I started getting more and more into horror movies. And one year I was home and the Fear Fest stuff was running. AMC does their Fear Fest line.
Sure.
And they were marathoning 4, 5, and 6. And we're like, for just for fun, let's put on 4 and see what it is. And before I knew it, I had gotten like totally sucked into the narrative. Like at the end, Jamie Lloyd comes with the knife and it ends, and I'm like, well, now we got to watch 5. I was like, we were like on our way somewhere. I was like, well, we can't go anywhere now. I gotta see what happens with this. This is so crazy. Like, it's this.
I heard they were trying to invite him back for Halloween Kills or something. I think there was a rumor that he was going to come back into because what the filmmakers really do is they kind of play to the fans all that stuff we remember from the early films. I mean, I see in the trailer they're bringing back elements of Halloween 3. And they're bringing back Nurse Marion, right? That's her name. I can't.
Yeah. They're definitely playing into the fandom. And I'm one of those people that I love to get like weirdly obsessive about like plot in like ongoing convoluted franchises that don't make sense. I like to kind of make it make sense in my brain.
Yeah.
So I just got really engaged in the craziness of 4 or 5. Like I even like 5 and 6, which a lot of people have problems with. And of course, like 4 is definitely like up on my list. That's a much beloved movie for me. I don't think of 5 and 6 as much as 4, but I love them. You know, I love these movies.
Yeah.
So
I think the one that I probably Resurrection I had a challenge with, I think.
Yeah, Resurrection is the hardest one to like.
Yeah.
And it largely because, and I always talk about how, okay, so when you compare like Halloween to the other major franchises, which would be like Jason and Freddy, for example,
Yeah.
like Jason and Freddy, both of them eventually took the trajectory of making the villain funny, right? Like Jason, you know, Jason 6 is basically a comedy. Jason X, I mean, come on, you don't send Jason to space without thinking it's funny. Even though it's still sort of like scary or whatever. I like those movies. Freddy, it becomes a one-liner machine, becomes a stand-up comedian who murders people. But Michael, even when those movies got kind of silly in plot, still took Myers seriously. Myers was always taken very seriously. But Halloween Resurrection is the one where they're like, nah, this is kind of silly. You know, you've got like Busta Rhymes kicking him in the nuts and like saying trick or treat, motherfucker, and stuff like that. Like, I mean, I get it, like, sure, whatever, but it's like that was the movie that kind of went away from like, let's take this thing seriously.
Right. And probably why there was a long gap. And then that's probably why Zombie came in and kind of took over. And I'll be honest, I don't know my feelings about Zombie's original, but I liked his part too.
Yeah. The zombie ones are interesting. And it's a hard thing. And I'll be honest, I've whenever the topic comes up, I always kind of skirt around it because I know that. So what I'll say is this: Rob Zombie has a very intense fan base, right? That love him, and I respect that, and I like a lot of what Zombie has done in his career. I don't love Zombie in the same way that I think maybe like his highest level fans do. But you know, I'm a fan of Devil's Rejects. I think that movie is very good, and I think it's a cool. Like, I think House of a Thousand Corpses has a lot to like in it, even though I think it's very clearly made by somebody who is early in his career. You know, there's things in it that don't quite work, and the editing style feels a little MTV to me. Like, you know, like I don't know how to transition scenes, or here's a bunch of jump cuts, and now we're in a new scene.
Well, he's a musician.
Yeah,
true, right?
True.
So,
feels like a music video. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, and no fault to him at all. But the Halloween movies. So for me, Halloween's a franchise. Whenever you remake something, and this is the ultimate argument, I like remakes, I like reboots. You know, I'm all for doing your own thing, right? Just taking the property and just doing something totally different with it, which I think Halloween 2 fits that more than Halloween 1. I think the first half of Halloween 1 is kind of Rob Zombie doing his own thing with Halloween, and then the second half is kind of just a shot for shot remake of Halloween 1 for the most part. Like, he runs through the plot and events of Halloween 1. And that's a little bit where it loses me, because it's just reminding me of a movie I like more.
I see.
Yeah, and frankly, I find it more interesting when Myers is a vessel for evil rather than a person who's been twisted by horrific events, right? Like a serial killer who's been created by bad shit happening to him.
Well, and what he did is he layered in a big backstory, whatever, which I think could have worked, but I don't know. It was a little hard to digest, but it had very much the Rob Zombie trademark of what he likes to do with his films. So
yeah. And it's definitely his movie. It has his fingerprints all over it, and I respect him for that. But you know, when I watch Halloween, also, like, I think there's certain elements of it that, like, if you're going to remake it, if you're going to take the title and you're going to sort of like leverage that, I think you owe a little bit to the essence of what that movie is, which is like, there's a beacon of good, there's a beacon of evil. There is a simplicity to it. There's a reverence, a level of respect that I don't know that. And look, and this is going to make me sound like an old man, but it's like, I'm cool with like vulgarity and shit in movies. Like language is fine. You know, I don't care as long as there's a purpose, right? You know, violence, whatever. But I felt like some of the stuff in that movie, like some of the overt vulgarity, like just didn't quite feel like it fit inside of a Halloween movie. It felt like Rob Zombie was really trying to make it fit in there. But it didn't all work. And then Loomis being a flawed character is something I really struggle with, because if Loomis is flawed and not that great of a guy, like then where's the good part of the evil, right? Where's the thing that's good? I guess it could be Laurie, but Laurie is more the innocent caught in the middle of that battle. Yeah, in my eyes, but I don't know.
And I like Malcolm McDowell. What I did appreciate, and I think some people didn't like, is in the 2018 Halloween, the doctor was flawed and a little bit kooky himself. Personally, I think that threw a lot of people. But on successive viewings, I'm like, this is great. I love this little subplot.
the Sartain stuff in 2018 is really interesting. Because it also sort of suggests that the evil can sort of move. Yeah. Like it's infectious in a way. And I think that's a cool bit of mythology that it's introducing into the trilogy. Like it's something that I'll be interested to see where that goes by Halloween Ends. Like if they do something with that, I'll be super into it. You know, as it is, I thought it was a cool little plot point, but I'll be disappointed if it doesn't ever sort of manifest again. This idea that like it can kind of travel to somebody close to him or something along those lines.
So I'm really looking forward to the new one coming out in October. And like I said, you know, I will join you, or you can come here, or whatever's here.
I'm excited to see it. I'm all in. I'm all in.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be the one that gets me to the theaters too. Well, Paul, I'd love to go on, but it's already been like 45 minutes. So, but let's take an opportunity to chat again in the future. Sure. And before we do go, remind anyone who's viewing of how they can find you online.
Yeah. So as you said earlier, I'm at I'm on Twitter primarily. I have an Instagram, but I only just started it. So it's sort of, I haven't really figured out what I'm doing with it yet, but, at Paul is Great 2000. I know it's a very modest handle, but I'm stuck with it. So, I love it. But yeah, so like you said, you can I do a lot of writing. So anytime I write something, I'll post it there. I'm on several podcasts, Dead Ringers, which is one where we sort of compare two different horror movies and talk about the shared sort of DNA between them.
That's fun.
And then I'm on a podcast called Hammer Pub, which is under the Scream Addicts banner. And I co-host that with my buddy Jinx and Allie Chappell. And we talk about Hammer movies. So we do like commentaries for Hammer films and things like that. So you can find links to both of those shows on my page as well.
Excellent. And I'd offer, if you ever need a guest on your podcast, I will gladly join.
Sure. Yeah.
Let me know. And thank you for being my guest today.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you having me.
Well, this has been Netflix and Phil with Paul Farrell and Phil Faiss. We have similar initials.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. I never noticed that.
Just figured that out. All right, I'm gonna hit stop here. If I hit stop video. All right, and that's it. Bye, everybody. All right, I stopped. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh no, wait! I just stopped my image. I need to stop the recording. Here we go. That was a glitch. I might leave that in. Right. Bye, everybody.